Hello and welcome to the second Etive Co paper piecing tutorial. Last time we spoke about how you could piece a simple pattern like this mountain pattern, and today we're going to be moving on to piece together the sections of a slightly more complex pattern. Today it's a cloud pattern. So the first thing to do is take a look at the pattern. So the reason this is a more complicated pattern is because it has multiple sections. So they're labelled here A1, A2, A3, B1, B2 and C. So we have to work through piecing each section individually, and then we have to sew the sections together in a certain order to make the entire pattern. What I'm going to do before I start is what I always do. I mark down which fabrics I'm using in which piece. So I've chosen two bright fabrics which I'm hoping you're going to be able to see really well on the camera. So I'm going to use this coral fabric for the cloud and a dark purple for the background. So I only really need to mark the cloud because the rest of them are going to be purple. The next thing I'll do is cut up the pattern. I need to cut along these thicker bold lines to get the 6 individual pieces. The next step is to sew each of these sections as you learnt to do in the previous paper piecing tutorial. Once you've done that, lay them out on your table, a bit like a jigsaw, copying the pattern that's provided in the instructions. Okay, so now you've laid out your pattern, we can begin to connect the sections together. So the way we'll do it is work through each numbered group individually. So I'll connect A1 to A2, and then I'll connect that group to A3. And then I'll do the B sections, and there's only one section for C, so I don't need to do anything to that. So first of all, I'm going to connect A1 to A2. I prefer to take the paper off before I connect the sections. Some people prefer to connect them with the paper on. It's up to you. So first of all, I'll take the paper off for A1. Then I'll take the paper off for A2. So what you'll need to do is connect them with right sides facing each other. So I pick up the two pieces, turn them towards each other. So if I line these two pieces of fabric up with the right sides facing each other and the cut edges exactly matching up, I should be able to create the perfect match. And what you'll find is that if you line them up so that where they cross is a 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabrics, then you should get a perfect match. So I'm just going to point out with my ruler where if my sewing line would go. I'd be sewing approximately down here. So I have matched up where this fabric on top crosses with that fabric underneath. So let's sew it and see if it matches. Okay, so we've got a really good join there. So I'm happy with that. And then if I was to iron that out flat, the edges would meet up perfectly. Great, so I'm really happy with this piece because you can see that that line now matches up pretty well. We've pretty much got straight lines along the edges there. I'll show you a slightly different technique for the next piece. So that was section A1 and A2 joined together. Now we join that group to section A3. Okay, so I'm going to again put them right sides facing. I've accidentally not covered my seam allowance entirely here, so there's a tiny notch out of the corner. So using my matching by seam allowance method might not work perfectly in this case, so we can use a slightly different method. So I'm going to lay them right sides facing each other. I'm going to line them up approximately where I know my good edge should meet,
And then what I'm going to do is just using my thumb, press down where the critical point in the pattern is, this point, where it matters whether the fabrics meet up, because if they don't, the cloud's going to look a bit off. So I'm just going to press down there and then open up the seam and judge whether they meet where I'd expect them. And then this might take a little bit of wiggling around to get it exactly where you want it to be. So I think that's about right. Maybe you can see that the coral points meet exactly there together. So I'm just going to use my finger to hold that in place, grasp that, and if I was doing an even more complicated pattern, I'd actually just do a few stitches through this part, check the seam, and then run along with my sewing machine, run along the whole edge. I'll do it that way now. Okay, so just check that that matches. I'm pretty happy with that join. So now I'm going to finish the whole seam. Okay, so I've finished connecting the sections of group A together, and I'm quite happy with where the cloud, the points of the cloud meet here. Although when I attached that final section A3, I think perhaps my cutting wasn't as accurate as I thought it was, because I've got a bit of the section coming off the end there. I don't think this will be a problem when I come to fix the rest of the pattern together, but it's not ideal. So now I'm going to move on to the sections labelled B. So B1 and B2. And I'll show you a final method that we can use to attach these sections. I like to just throw my paper on the floor whilst I'm removing it and clear it up later. Much quicker. Okay, so now we'll just connect sections B1 to B2. So again, I'm going to put the pieces face to face, try and line them up as best I can, assuming that my seam allowances, I've cut my seam allowances correctly. So it should be approximately there. Again, I'm going to use my thumb to estimate where my seam will fall and just see how well those clouds meet. So I'm quite happy with that placement. This time I'm going to pin it in place, like so. So then if I was doing a larger pattern, I might use this type of technique because it's just a bit safer than just using your fingers. You're more likely to keep that the seams meeting where you want them to. Okay, again, I'm quite happy with where these 2 points of the cloud meet, so I'm just going to press that flat. So now we've finished group A, we've finished group B, and I'll just take that away, we've finished group C as well. If you take a look at the instructions that go along with this pattern, you'll see that I say connect group A to group B, and then connect group AB to C. So that's what I'm going to do now. We'll just follow the same principles where we lay the groups face to face. And I'm not happy with the size of one of these sections. I think it's because A3 was slightly off. So I'm going to use my pinching technique to check that the cloud is meeting where I expect it to. And that looks about right. So I'll just take that over to the sewing machine to join the two sections together. Okay, so that's groups A and B joined together, and this was the final seam that I just sewed, and I'm quite happy there with where the clouds meet up. And on the whole, it's quite square, so not bad. The final thing we have to do is join on section C to group AB. So we do that in the same way. We'll flip over the main section and then face to face join up section C. Now you might find where you have a section that's just a single piece of fabric is a bit longer than the group where you've joined lots of different sections together. That's something that just happens, I think, because you've got so many seams and it's hard to iron them totally flat. So what you could do when you sew this seam is gently pull this group underneath so that it stretches to match the size of section C, or just sew section C on and don't worry about the slight distortion in the fabrics underneath. So that's the finished block. What I would do now is just get my sewing ruler and just finish off the edges so that the whole thing is nice and square. And there we have it. This is quite a difficult pattern in some ways because there were a lot of positions where you have to join up the sections quite accurately to get a clean finish. But if you follow those rules that I showed you, hopefully it'll work out okay. So I hope you've enjoyed making this cloud. Please let me know again if you have any suggestions of other tutorials that you'd like to see or improvements that I could make.